a call on Doug Hamilton, Niagara 2022 Canada Games Board Chair, respecting the Canada Summer Games Host Society update, and it's the Indigenous involvement in the Canada Summer Games. Good morning, Doug. You have the floor.
Chair Foster, and thank you to many of you for your support so far during our efforts to organize and deliver these games. I was asked by staff to come in and give a very brief update concerning Indigenous inclusion in the games. For your benefit, we have two sponsors, co-sponsors of our Indigenous community activations at the games. One is Meridian Credit Union, who Wade Stazer, their COO, has kindly agreed to join me today. Wade's also the Treasurer and Secretary of our Host Society Board of Directors. And Niagara College is our second co-sponsor. And rather than get into the detail, because there is a lot of information and a lot of detail concerning our Indigenous activations, what I thought I'd do is just give you a very brief summary. And that summary really is the view of an outsider. Minister Saint-Onge was here for several days, has now left, but her staff and several representatives of the federal government are continuing to be here. We meet every day, including earlier this morning, and the feedback that we've received from them on this issue is that, first of all, we are the most inclusive Canada Games ever. We're now hosting the 28th edition of the Canada Games. We're very pleased to hear that feedback. And second, as some of you will be aware, as part of our planning for the Games, we created a Indigenous Partnership Council was created by the Indigenous community, and has worked with us to plan the Indigenous community involvement in our games. The federal government's view and Minister Saint-Onge's view is that this is a best practice that we have now established, that is one that they would like to continue going forward. So we have set the bar on that. I wanted then to introduce Mr. Stazer, who has some very brief comments about his perspective as our co-sponsor for the Indigenous activation.
Thank you. Very, very brief, just to say that, obviously on behalf of Meridian, we are on our own reconciliation journey as an organization, and have, spent significant efforts around our DEIB programming in our organization. This is a great fit for us. And very, very proud to partner with the college as the presenting Indigenous sponsor for the Games.
Chair Foster, we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Doug and Wade. And Wade, good to see you. He lives in Beamsville, so I have to be nice to Wade. Is there any questions for either of these gentlemen? And I know they're very busy with the games going on, so any questions to them? Through to you, Anne-Marie.
Chair Foster, we have Councillor Yip would like to ask a question. Councillor
Yip, please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The first question is going to be sort of how you would like to do this, and maybe the Commissioner can also answer the question. So, from what I understand, this presentation is in response to a request that I made at the last meeting. The last meeting, I asked for a report on what transpired that resulted the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation cutting all ties with the Games, what will be done to repair this relationship, and what steps will be taken to ensure that this doesn't happen again. I asked for that report to come to this meeting. The report has not come to this meeting. This presentation, I was led to believe, would answer those questions, and it has not. So how would you like me to proceed?
You have every right to be asking questions of the delegation at this point, Councillor Yip, concerning their presentation. And if you wish to discuss that further, we'll do that under other business.
Okay, thank you. So through you, Chair, I have a number of questions then for Mr. Hamilton and Stazer. So just before I begin my questions, can you remind us how much funding Canada Summer Games received from the region, please?
I don't have that information at my fingertips right now.
Okay, but is it approximately $30 million?
I don't have that information at my fingertips.
Councillor Yip.
No, because it's important.
Councillor Yip, please. So I'm going to ask you to deal with the presentation that has been brought in front of you. If you have other areas of questions that you wish to bring, please bring them under other business. However, The presentation that has been provided to us this morning is quite clear and specific. So you have every right to ask about that presentation. So
Okay.
thank you.
So, Chair, thank you. So my questions are related to what I had asked for in the report last month, which was not covered in this presentation. So again, how would you like me to proceed?
As I stated earlier, that can come up under other business, please.
Okay, so I will have a number of questions for staff that, from what I understand, they're not able to answer. So that should make an interesting section of other business. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton and Stazer, for your presentation this morning. I'm sorry that it didn't actually address what I had requested at the last meeting.
Thank you. Other please identify to the clerk if you have other business to raise, and I believe Councillor Yip, you wish to bring some items up.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Chair. It was my understanding that the presentation that we received this morning was intended to answer the questions that I raised at our July meeting in my request for a report on what transpired that resulted in the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation cutting all ties with the Canada Summer Games, what will be done to repair the relationship, and what steps will be taken to ensure that this doesn't happen again. The presentation, of course, did not do that. What we heard was an extremely brief presentation of, in my view, platitudes about what are viewed as successes, and neither any recognition of where there may be room for improvement, nor how what's happened might impact the region and other funders and their relationships or reputation with Indigenous communities. Whilst I appreciate that the Niagara's edition of the Canada Summer Games have been called the most inclusive ever, it doesn't mean that the Games have made no errors in their attempts to be inclusive. It certainly doesn't mean that every community that should have been included, including Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are a treaty partner for this land that we're on, wasn't eventually excluded. And I think one of the errors was made clear in that very brief presentation we received when it was raised that an Indigenous Partnership Council was created by the Indigenous community, singular, when there are in fact several Indigenous communities that we recognize in our land acknowledgement at council meetings, and we cannot appropriately engage with Indigenous communities if we consider them a monolith. It would be similar to saying, hey Europe, we're recognizing your culture, singular, French, Italian, English, you're all the same. I also know, as I said at the last meeting, that whatever transpired wasn't related to something that we at the region had any control over or direct role in. However, given that we are a major funder of the Games to the tune of approximately $30 million, there are a number of questions that should be answered, given that this issue will still impact our relationships and reputation in Indigenous communities and the wider community after the Games are over in 11 days. So, I would like the following questions answered in a report because I don't think that it's fair to staff to ask them to answer all of these questions now. And I want that report to come to the September 14th Corporate Services Committee meeting. So the questions are, and I will email these to the Commissioner afterwards because I'm not sure that anyone can write as quickly as I'm going to ask all of the questions.
Councillor Yep, I'm okay with you bringing these forward. However, because of the scenario we're in, I'd first like to ask Commissioner Harrison, because of your request earlier, to Commissioner Harrison, when were you, I know that came out as direction from Councillor Yip at the last meeting, so when were we thinking of having a report coming back?
So I have, so thanks for that question. I have a bit of a statement that addressed a couple of the questions that I wanted to read earlier when the presentation was going on that might provide some work. We could, again, depending on the questions that are being asked and if they're new, you know, to turn it, we hopefully would like to turn it around for September, but I'd have to see what the questions are to see the amount of work. But I did have something I did want to say after Councillor Yip asked the question, simply because it was something that was going to be provided. Some of the initiatives that the region has taken is regarding the Indigenous community.
Okay, thank you. So we may come back to that, to Commissioner Harrison. So please go ahead, Councillor Yip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the questions, which again I will email, so don't worry about frantically writing them down. What events transpired to lead to Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation withdrawing their support and involvement in Canada Summer Games? Was the Canada Summer Games Board told that having Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation sign a memorandum of understanding with a consultant who is also a board member, rather than directly with the Canada Summer Games to coordinate the Indigenous portion of the Canada Summer Games, a concerning approach? Why did Canada Summer Games continue with this approach after concerns were raised? If the Canada Summer Games Board was not told by their board representative, who again was acting as the consultant, that there were concerns about this approach, why were they not told? What work was engaged in to ensure that Indigenous communities were being recognized as the unique communities they are, rather than as a monolith? What has Canada Summer Games done to work toward repairing this relationship? Why has Canada Summer Games made no clear public statement about Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation withdrawing their support and involvement? Given the potential impact on the reputations of the funders, why has there been no direct communication from the Canada Summer Games Board to the funders about what happened? So again, I'll email all of those questions. In the meantime, Chair Bradley and I have discussed this, and we agree that he will reach out directly to Chief Laforme to discuss the relationship between Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Niagara Region. And in fact, earlier in this meeting, at this point, a lot earlier in this meeting, I received a note from Chair Bradley that says, I have met with the Chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit by Zoom a few months ago, and I anticipate further meetings with him, at which time I will raise all issues relevant, including the issue with the Canada Summer Games Host Society, and explore ways to overcome any challenges and look for ways to improve our relationship in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Yip. So please forward those on to staff. Any